All right, good morning, everybody. Hope everybody's doing well. So here's how this is going to look. This is a little bit different, obviously, than what we normally do because I'm not there. However, Mr. Stevens is a way better math teacher than I am, so he is definitely here to help if you need it. Okay, but we normally have our whiteboard out and we take notes from that. So what I want you to do right now is take out your notes and we'll get started. Okay, here we go. So what we're doing today is what we call slope intercept. And if you recall, last week we were finding slope on graphs, okay? We were also finding slope from 2 points. If I was finding slope on a graph, if you remember, we always read slope from where? Left to right. So we find the points, and for example, if I had a line from left to right that's going like this, that's considered positive slope. If I have a line that from left to right is doing this, that's considered what? Negative slope. If I have a line that is straight like this, what's that considered? No slope. And if I have a line that's, oops, and that was straight, going straight up and down, we don't know if it's going up or we don't know if it's going down. And does anybody remember what that was? That was considered undefined slope. Okay, good. All right, so let's go into what we call slope intercept form of an equation. Okay, and we're going to use this a lot. And you can ask Mr. Stevens, as he's an algebra teacher, he's going to use it a lot in his classes next year as well for you guys. Okay, so last week we talked a little bit about how when you have slopes, sometimes we're going to refer to it as, does anybody remember what I said? A lowercase m. Okay, and that reason that we're going to call it that, okay, is because that's going to be part of our slope intercept form of an equation. Okay, so let's say, well, first of all, I want to show you what slope intercept form of an equation looks like. And I want you to remember this. Okay, you're going to use this a lot. Okay, y equals mx plus b. Okay, now a lot of these things you've seen before. You've seen x before, obviously, you've seen y. Those are the points on a coordinate plane, right? Now, this m we've already talked about. What is that m? That m is our slope. Okay, now this b we haven't talked about. Okay, so we're going to talk about what that b means. That b is what we call the y-intercept. Okay, does anybody know what the y-intercept is? We have a line on a graph. Okay, let's say we have a line like this. Okay, the point where that line crosses, remember this is the y-axis, this is the x-axis. Where does this line that we just graphed, where does it cross the y-axis? It crosses right here. Okay. Well, what is the value, or what is the number where it crosses that y-axis? Again, it's positive, and it's up here at 1. This would have a y-intercept. We're going to call that a b of 1. Okay. That's where that line crosses the y-axis. Okay. So once we have some numbers in here, okay, and for today, all of your equations are going to be written in this form, so you're not going to have to move numbers around, okay, or try to solve for y or anything like that, okay? So you're going to see something like this. Let's say I had y equals negative 2/5 x plus 3, okay? What we're going to do, the first part of this whole lesson is you're going to be determining the slope and the y-intercept. This is actually pretty easy, guys. All you have to do is, this is already in y equals mx plus b form, okay? So what I do is I'm going to write m equals, and I'm going to find what that slope is. And remember, slope is always going to have to be written, even if it's a whole number or an integer, sorry. Even if it's an integer, we're still going to write it as a fraction because when we start graphing these, they're going to have to be a fraction, okay? So y-intercept and slope. Let's go over here and let's look. What is in place of this m? This. That's going to be my slope. So what am I going to write as far as my slope? -2 over 5. Okay. And what's going to be my y-intercept? Well, I want to include the sign that's in front of this. Okay. So what kind of 3 is this? This is a positive 3. Okay. So from this equation, I was able to identify my slope right here and my y-intercept. Okay. Does that make sense? Pretty simple. Okay. Now, let's say the reason that I said you got to include that the sign in front of that y-intercept. Let's say I have something like this: y equals 1/3 x minus 5. Okay, remember, y equals mx plus b. Now, this is again the slope, and this is the y-intercept. Okay, so we're going to write m equals. By the way, on all of this video, guys, if you are having trouble keeping up or it's going too fast, Mr. Stevens has the ability to slow this down. He can pause it. He can answer questions as we go. So please, please, please raise your hand if you're not able to keep up, or you need to take a break, a minute to catch up on notes or whatever. All right. Okay. So let's take a look at this. What's our slope here? Okay, our slope is going to be this number right here. That's going to be what? 1/3. Okay. Now we're going to find our y-intercept. And remember, what did I say? You've got to include the sign in front of it. Okay. So what would our y-intercept be? Y-intercept would be -5. And if we were to take this to a graph, just so you know, this -5 is where that line would cross the y-intercept. Okay, but we're going to go into graphing later, not today. Okay, but just so you've kind of got an idea. All right, let's take a look at another one. Let's say I've got y equals -x plus 2. Well, what's different about this one? We don't really have a coefficient. We don't have a number in front of that variable. Or do we? If you guys remember, when I have a variable by itself, what is its value? What is its coefficient? That's right, it's 1. Okay, so if we were going to identify our slope and our y-intercept, okay, well, first of all, I don't have a number in front of this, but if I was to put a number in front of that, would I change the value if I did a -1? No. But what does my slope always have to be? A what? Fraction. So would I change the value if I put -1 over 1? That's still the same value, isn't it? And this is imperative because when we start graphing, this has to be in a fraction form. So let's identify the slope as -1 over 1. Now, it's not wrong if you were to just put -1. That's also the same thing. We need to get into the habit of putting this into fraction form because we're gonna be graphing from this form very soon. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, what is my y-intercept here? My y-intercept is correct, 2. All right. Does that make sense? I'm going to write a couple down here. I'm going to give you a few moments to try them on your own. Okay. Y equals -5x minus 3. Y equals 2/3 x minus a half. Okay, I'll give you a moment. I'm going to pause the video for a second, and I want you to, or Mr. Stevens can pause it. I want you to take a moment and find the y-intercept and the slope of each of those. Okay, so on this first one, we have slope, we have y-intercept. What's the slope of this? -5, which we can write as -5 over what? Over 1. And what's our y-intercept? Remember, include the sign in front of it. Y-intercept is going to be -3. Over here, we have slope, we have y-intercept. And what's the slope of this line? 2/3. And y-intercept would be including that in front of it, -1/2. Pretty easy, right? Okay, the next part, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take the slope and y-intercept and we're going to plug them into the equation. Okay, so let's say I'm given a slope. Let's say m equals -3/4. And let's say b, which is my y-intercept, equals -1. Well, I'm going to plug these into that equation that's called slope-intercept form. And remember, what is that? That's y equals mx plus b. So let's go ahead and plug these in. Y equals, what are we going to, we know that x is going to stay there. What are we going to plug in for that slope? And what are we going to replace this m with? That's right, negative 3/4. Now, plus b, but this isn't a plus. Remember, we include the sign that's in front of it. So we're not going to put plus -1, even though that's the same value. We're just going to bring the sign with this. Okay, so we have y equals negative 3/4 x minus 1. And what we've done is we've taken the slope, and we've taken the y-intercept, and we've plugged them into this equation. Does that make sense? Easy. Let's try another one. Let's say I have a slope of 1 and a y-intercept of negative or positive 3. Y equals, and I'd like you to write this every time, okay, just so you remember. Now, I can put a 1 here, can't I? I can say 1x, and I can put plus 3. What's another way to write this, though? Without this 1, I could just say y equals x plus 3. Would that be the exact same value? Yes, it would. Okay, it doesn't really matter which way you do that when you have a coefficient that's a 1. And if this was a negative, I'm sorry, I wrote y. I should have written a b here. This would look like this. Y equals, we can write negative 1x minus 5, or we could have just done what? Y equals negative x minus 5. Either one of these would be acceptable. Okay? Does that make sense, guys? I think that that's pretty much it. Again, Mr. Stevens is here to help, so please ask him if you need any help or have any questions, guys. I hope you guys are having fun, doing well, and I miss class, and I hope you guys have a great day. God bless you guys, and I miss you, and I will see you soon.